Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is John Hyde. He is the founder of Turf, and I got the experience of using Turf a few weeks ago on Urbit, and it's really exciting to use something on Urbit because I found out about Urbit maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and at that point you could only message people, and now you can message people and go on Turf and play around with the virtual world that's in there, and also do video calls. But I haven't done any video calls on it. Would love to do it. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So what is Turf? What's the origin story of Turf?
Turf is, at its core, it's a virtual world, um, and it's built on Urbit, so it's by nature decentralized. So the current implementation of Turf is 2D, sort of Pokemon vibes, pixel art. You walk around, you can place items and edit things and upload your own artwork and talk to people, and then you have your own space, which is your turf, and you can make a portal to someone else's turf with their permission, and so you can explore walking through portals to get to different places and explore the larger world.
Oh, how'd this come about? Where did it come from? Where'd the idea come from?
Well, I found out about Urbit, I think end of 2021, and then shortly after I started learning Hoon and thinking about things that would be cool to build on Urbit, and I had an idea for a little multiplayer game. Um, And that was just sort of the first idea. And I thought it'd be cool if you could program your own items in the game so each person could make their game do what they wanted to. And then I was like, that sounds like a lot of work. I probably won't do that. So a year goes by, I finished a different project as a grant for the UF. And then I was trying to figure out what to do next. And I had a suggestion, which was I was basically told, like, this is cool, but people aren't going to use it. So you should do something people will use. And I was like, well, I could do this game idea. So then I found out that Josh, the executive director of the Urbit Foundation, had a similar idea that he wanted someone to make. So I was like, yeah, I could do that. I could be that person.
Very cool. Now, how has the developer experience changed? Well, actually, no, before this, let's get into your background as a developer. What was the first language that you learned? How old were you? What's your experience with development before Urbit?
I forget exactly how old I was. Um, I was like maybe like early high school. I started learning Java online. Someone told me that I should learn Java so I could mod Minecraft, and I was like, yeah, that sounds kind of cool. So I
Wait, so
started
you
learning
can what?
Java, mod Minecraft, make
Mod
mods.
Minecraft. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got
Yeah, I never actually wound up modding Minecraft. I just started learning Java because of that.
it.
Um, so I taught myself Java slowly over the course of a few years. I taught myself a bit of C++. Eventually, I took AP Computer Science in high school, and then I was fortunate to have a friend whose dad was the CEO of a software company in the area I was in. So I got an internship there while in high school, which turned into a job after high school, and that's where I learned JavaScript and front-end development, and like API and backend stuff as well. Um, so that was a really valuable experience. And then I worked there on and off for a bit. Then I worked at another place, and then while I was working at the second place, I found Urbit.
So developer experience, the what is it like in Hoon now? Has it changed significantly? How big of a gap was it for you to pick up Hoon?
Hmm. I would say the developer experience has changed not super significantly. I'd say the major change since when I started was the improvement in the docs. The docs have gotten a lot better. It's definitely still not perfect, but they've gotten a lot better, so it's a lot easier to look things up. The language itself has not changed significantly. I think they maybe added a rune, which nobody uses because it's not quite ready anyway. Um, so,
And can
but
what is a rune is a syntax, right?
yeah, it's syntax. So, in most languages, you have keywords like if, else, loop, things like that. In Hoon, there's no keywords. There's just runes, which are two characters, which don't look like anything when you're first learning Hoon, but you eventually figure out what they mean. And there's like a logical grouping to them. So if it starts with a certain character, you know that it has a certain class of functionality, and then
Oh.
based on what the character is, you have to remember what that means, or maybe you can infer it, but often you just have to remember. what it what it
I'm gonna learn
does.
it one day. I'm gonna learn Hoon one day because I've wanted to learn Hoon for a very long time, but I don't know how to program normally, and I thought that it would probably not be the best idea to start with Hoon, just given the documentation problem and the community problem, which is that while the community is extremely helpful and I can go on to Plon and find answers quickly to my questions, ChatGPT has not yet been, or the other AIs have not yet been trained on Hoon specifically. And do you know anybody who's doing that right now? Who's trying to make developers' lives easier by training LLMs on Hoon?
I've seen a few people post about it on Twitter that
Mm,
they've like set up a Hoon GPT,
mm,
but I haven't played around with it and I don't know how far they really got. Um,
interesting. Okay. And so back to the question about the developer experience. Do you get frustrated by it at all still?
I do sometimes. There are certain things about it which don't make sense to me. Like I feel like they should be different. Like some of the way like writing a wet gate, for example, is a really useful thing to be able to do because it lets you operate on something without knowing exactly what its type is going to be, and then the return value of your function can have a type that's specific to the type that was input. However, the ergonomics of doing such a thing get very tricky because the way you have to construct, the type based on the input type, you have to like do weird like shenanigans to basically tell the compiler what sort of variation on the input type you want to output and things like that.
Got it.
Um, the other things like you can't just check to see if something is a list because the way it checks what type something is uses a certain uses a kind of recursion that doesn't know how to escape the loop. So it just gives up rather than, it can't just say like, oh, I see that this looped in the same place as this, list type. So I guess this is a list. It says, oh, this thing has a loop in it. I can't evaluate it, compiler error. Try something else. Um,
Um, Okay, and
things
so
like
this
that.
brings me questions about compilers. So let me give you my understanding, neophyte understanding of what a compiler does normally, and then I'll try to ask questions about what it does in Hoon. So a compiler basically takes the code that you're writing in Python and then breaks it down into maybe C, and then C then compiles back to assembly. Is that how it works?
Well, Python in particular is a scripting language, so it's an interpreted language, so it never compiles. I
Oh,
mean, someone might have written a Python compiler, I don't know, but in general, Python runs as an interpreted language. So there's a compiled interpreter program which knows how to read in Python as the program's running and turn it into
oh,
execution.
it,
But for something like C, which is a compiled language, yeah, I mean, it compiles to, I mean, I don't know too much about compilers, but I believe it compiles directly to machine code
to
and
assembly,
then you
right?
compile
Or
it.
are there other machine codes?
Well, assembly is it's one step above machine code. So machine code is literally just a series of bits that are either 0 or 1. And
Got it.
assembly is, short instructions that, um, you know, are very low level stuff like, you know, write at this value to this register. Um, and I'm pretty sure I haven't worked in assembly. I believe that the mapping from assembly to machine code for a given processor is like very straightforward. It's just like more convenient than typing out zeros and ones, which I don't think anyone does pretty
Did
much.
did people used to do that? People used to type out zeros and ones? Do you know that?
I don't know. It seems like at some point someone would have had to.
I'm
If you
gonna
think about
ask.
it, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
You
gonna
don't
ask
get assembly from anywhere.
Twitter real quick. Did people ever write out um, uh, code in ones and zeros? If so, when?
It might
And
have been punch cards because I think they used to store the programs not in computer memory but on punch cards,
and
and
uh,
so
oh,
when there were
interesting.
holes punched, I think it was equivalent to a 0 or a 1.
And what is your handle on Twitter so I can tag you?
Uh, turf underscore on underscore Urbit. It's the business handle.
Got it. Okay. So, zeros and ones, assembly helps with the zeros and ones parts. Let's take it into Hoon and Knox. So now that I have a better understanding of what a compiler is, the with Hoon, Hoon is a functional language that does compile into Knox. Is that inaccurate?
Yes.
Okay. And knock is machine code
It's the equivalent of machine code for Urbit. Yeah.
because Urbit is a virtual computer.
Yes. So
Ah,
in practice, knock is kind of an interpreted language because it runs in a knock interpreter, but from the Urbit perspective, it's machine code. From my Mac OS perspective, it's an interpreted language.
okay. I'm having
Once we
some
have a
trouble
knock
here.
PU, which processes knock natively, then it'll be truly machine code.
Got it. Okay. Do you have a native planet?
I do not.
Are you going to get one?
I'm sure I'll get one eventually.
Okay. And do you are you and you don't have to answer this if it's confidential, or are you hosting things on Urbit?
What do you mean
Oh, well,
hosting
I guess
things?
Turf is hosting things, right? Because Turf has data. What I'm trying to get at is
Hmm.
essentially oh no, I'm losing it. So no, so I've heard that most of Urbit is still being run on cloud, which probably isn't a huge problem
I
in
see.
general. But they want to move more over to things like Native Planet or other options for that, so that it's not on the cloud. It's not able to be taken over by assholes who, for some reason, want to change their terms of service. And so, like, are you hosting things on the cloud, or how are you managing that smart part?
Well, for the time being, my main planet and a couple of moons are being hosted on my home computer.
Hmm.
And so I host the Turf group from there. And I have a weird issue on my computer right now where my ships will crash about once a day.
Oh
You
no,
know,
because of
for
usage?
a reason. It's not clear why. I
Oh.
don't know yet. I filed an issue, but I haven't heard anything yet.
Does that happen a lot
Um,
where there's like a problem and it's unclear why the problem exists?
it happens from time to time. It doesn't usually happen as like a repeated thing like it is right now. It's kind of unusual, but usually it's like if there's an upgrade or something, something will change, or
Got it.
some like um there are various things that can change on a computer which makes it suddenly stop running Urbit properly. Like if you run out of disk space, for example. Right now I'm getting an error where it says I'm out of disk space, but I'm definitely not out of disk space. So that's mysterious to me and causes the group to go down. So it might be better if it was cloud hosted, but currently it's not. Pandex, the star that distributes turf and which hosts the Pandex town, is hosted in DigitalOcean, but it's not on a hosting provider like
Got it.
Klon
Got it.
or Red Horizon.
Okay. And DigitalOcean is a legacy internet cloud provider, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it just gives me a little box that I can run stuff on. I'm pretty sure Red Horizon and stuff are. I assume they're using similar solution rather than running their own servers in their own offices, but I don't know for sure. I
Okay.
haven't asked.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Now, do so there's a star that is hosting your planet. Do you know that person individually?
Uh, no.
No.
So my sponsor, I believe, is Batbus because I bought my planet off of Urbit.live or Urbit.me. I forget which one. Um, and so, they spawned a bunch of planets to sell from that star. And so then I got my planet and then that was my star. And they keep it running, so I haven't had to uh, find a new sponsor. I think I did change my OTA provider though, because the updates don't always come through on time from a lot of the stars on the network.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Hmm. Okay, I gotta ask. So you've got some paintings in the background,
Oh
and
yeah,
one of them looks like an angel. One of them looks like a Greek Orthodox priest. And I love talking about spirituality and religion and all these different things. And I would like to go into it if you're willing.
sure.
What is your faith, or what is your philosophy?
I'm an Orthodox Christian, born and raised.
Born and raised. Interesting. Okay. I've for some reason I thought that you may have converted, because it is becoming more popular to convert to Orthodoxy. And so you're born and raised. Well, what do you think about this trend of converting to Orthodox, particularly like Eastern Orthodox churches from Westerners?
Um, well, from my perspective, it's great. I'm very happy that we're getting new people and new people are finding what I consider to be the truth. Um, it's definitely interesting to see the sorts of people who find the faith. There's certain there's definitely common traits that you tend to find among new converts nowadays.
And what are they?
Um, a lot of them are right wing. A lot of them are interested in uh, you know, what some would consider conspiracy theories.
Oh,
But I mean, there's a lot of
Gnosticism.
variety still.
It's
But
got to have to do with Gnosticism, right? Well,
I
so
don't know.
the reason why conspiracy theories and Gnosticism kind of go hand in hand is because of the truth is out there, but the demiurge is preventing us from seeing the truth. And the demiurge basically it takes on various forms. And this is my interpretation. It's definitely heavily influenced by John Vervaeke. And so it's a sort of overfitting. Not to say that some conspiracy theories aren't true. I do believe that some conspiracy theories are true. I happen to think that a lot of them are not true as well. Most of them are not true. And so there's a connection between Gnosticism and conspiracy theories in the Western tradition. One of the most interesting things I learned recently from a previous podcast guest is that her take on the rise of flat Earth, which is also connected to it's like the ultimate conspiracy theory, is connected to the Scots Irish, which like the Scots Irish from England who moved to the U.S. who wanted to find truth outside of any organized religion, and so flat Earth is like the ultimate kind of expression of individualism. And so the reason why I
Huh.
brought it up with the Orthodox is because I have an impression that Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox is more mystical or is more open to mysticism than the Catholic Church. Would you agree with that? Would you disagree with that?
I am not familiar enough with Catholic Church honest, to judge fairly, but that sounds plausible.
Hmm.
There's definitely a mystical element. We're we're dealing with spiritual things, not just philosophizing about God.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly, the theology, which is that's I think why the move to Eastern Orthodox is so interesting is because I think it has something to do with the fact that the Eastern Orthodox Church doesn't get in the way of mysticism in the way that the Catholic Church has a tradition of doing it. Because
Mm.
the Inquisition was basically like the state of the Catholic Church interjecting into people's beliefs and saying you can't do that stuff, which actually the both histories of both churches have a lot of that, starting all the way in 300 AD with Arianism. I believe like a bunch of mystics were having crazy theories that led them to interpretations that were very different from this nascent state that was being associated with Christianity. And it's like shut that shit down. We gotta tamp that down. That's not approved. And so that's the type of like mysticism thing. And so if you feel like sharing, which particular denomination are you from the Orthodox Church?
Well, I grew up in a church of converts, so we were technically under the Greek
Greek.
Patriarchate, but
Yeah,
we're not ethnically Greek for the most part. We have a few
yeah,
Greek people in our church, but
got it. Yeah,
um, yeah.
that's really cool. Thank you for going down that rabbit hole with me. Let's go back to the Urbit. Uh, so developer experience. What draws you in about Urbit? What do you think the future of Urbit is?
Well, what drew me in initially was it seems like a place where cool, smart people are gathering, and it seems like something that could potentially be really good for people if it can replace the current paradigm of the internet with a new paradigm.
Hmm.
And also, I thought it was pretty cool that people took the time to build this computer in the way that they did, rather than doing the easy thing of
Because it's
not
not
building
easy at
everything
all.
from scratch. Um, at this point, I'm still motivated by, still drawn to it by the same things. Um, I forgot the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
What do you think about the future of your Urbit? Where is it going?
Oh, the future of Urbit, yes. Um, it's really hard to say where it's going. I I could talk about where I'd like it to go. It's hard to, and it looks like it might get there. There's just a lot of uncertainty because, for something like this to take off, it has to, the people working on it have to be able to stay incentivized to work on it for long enough to get it where it needs to
Mhm.
go,
Mhm.
um, which to a certain extent involves money. Um, so I feel like from purely technological perspective, it would be good to do, more to, do some uh serious edits to Hoon and, you know, explore the shrubbery thing people are talking about and really get that nailed down. Explore maybe rewriting some other parts of the system and like make a really solid foundation from a business perspective. We sort of have to be building user space stuff like I'm doing. So everything I build, I assuming I'll have to rewrite the backend at least once, hopefully twice, you
Uh,
know. Um, but I mean, I'm hopeful that people working on Urbit still care about um, making the computer as good as it possibly can be, enough that we'll be able to make those big changes when we realize we need to. Um, and I have hope that we'll be able to stay funded while doing so, but it definitely seems somewhat precarious to me. Not a sure thing at all.
what does a good computer give you? Like, what is the point of developing a good computer? What do our current computers not give us that Urbit gives us?
A good computer does what you want and doesn't do things you don't want, is the simplest answer.
That's great.
um, More specifically, a good computer, um, is I mean, really a good computer is one that runs good programs, and good programs are written
Ooh.
by people who are writing programs well. And so you have to create a computer that you can write good programs on, um, which means doing the right thing has to be relatively easy, and doing the wrong thing has to feel bad.
No.
Um, and currently, with modern computers, doing the wrong thing is very easy because you just install
Oh,
the package and then you use it, and then you've added many megabytes to your build and also unknown behavior.
okay, that's really interesting. Um, uh, so yeah, you kind of answered the follow-up question. What does a good program do? And there's a related question, which is that I was asking somebody a couple of months ago about Urbit and like, what does it do that Linux doesn't do? And they gave a great answer, which was Linux is a single player game, and Urbit is the multiplayer game, and you're building a multiplayer game on Urbit. So I think you have special insight into this. Do you agree with that? His definition of what Urbit does that Linux doesn't do?
That's definitely a huge part of it, yeah. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm hoping that's not the only advantage it has over Linux, but it's
Mhm.
definitely a big part, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Interesting. Has anybody tried to talk to Linus Torvald about Urbit? Do you know anybody who's
I
tried?
don't know.
Yeah, I should feel
I
like I
haven't
should
heard.
start tweeting him. And okay, so uh, you mentioned a really good point about business earlier, and that it's brilliant to have the idealistic goal of building a computer that doesn't make bad programs easy to write. And then the other thing is that it needs to be business oriented. And we don't have to go into this particular point, but there was a schism in Urbit, and some people took that very seriously and said, okay, well now we're gonna start one that doesn't have the same issues. And I'm going to be investigating that on the show as well. And I'm not taking sides. I'm going to be following both quite closely, as well as Plunder as well. And so there is essentially um, the business goal. So let's go turn that into it. Oh yeah, how are you gonna create a business out of turf? What are some of the potential things that you see being a business?
The main thing that I'm planning on right now that seems most promising is, once there's some people actually using turf on a daily basis and I have like a little bit of momentum, um, more than just a handful of people each day. Um, I want to give people the ability to sell items to each other.
Uh,
And then when you see that someone has placed an item, you can see that it's an authentic, you know, copy that someone has gifted to them or that someone has sold to them.
got it.
Um, that could be with NFTs. It might not need to be with NFTs, but
What are
that'd
the
be
other
cool.
options?
Um, just keep a record on the ship of the person who sold it, and
Hmm.
then when you see someone has an item for that person, you say, "Hey, did you really sell this person this item?" And they can say yes or no, um, which might be faster or might be slower depending on if that person is still online.
Hmm.
So it could be nice to have it on chain, so you don't have to rely on that person's connection. Um, because if you buy an item from someone and then that person goes offline, it would be nice to still be able to prove that you bought that item rather than uploaded it with your own artwork. Because anyone can upload anything they want, so you can quote
Oh,
steal unquote an item pretty easily.
oh, got it.
Um,
Got it. Oh, right.
but
Anybody can upload a item, but they just have
yeah,
to be able to write in Hoon in order to do it
nope, you can do it through the UI. You can
through
just
the UI.
go in the editor, create item, upload your image, give it a name.
And then who are you working with other people or is this a solo project?
So solo project as far as development goes right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a few advisors and collaborators who, I talk a lot with Josh from the Urbit Foundation, because he was, there at the beginning of working on the project, and he's got ideas about business side of it and, you know, high level like product stuff, and he gives me feedback. There's a guy who is like a turf enthusiast who gives me a lot of feedback about stuff he wants to see in turf that would
Yeah,
make it easier
great.
for him to build stuff. He really likes uploading lots of assets and makes feature requests, which is great. And there's a number of people who give input at smaller levels, but I say I have like two main collaborators right now on the product
Uh,
side.
the person who, well, actually, I would like to interview both Mr. Lehman and also um, the guy who is giving you feedback as a user.
Hmm.
And if you're willing to share their Urbit handle now, or maybe after we're recording, if we don't want to dox anyone here. So yeah, I would love to talk to them. I'll leave it up to you to let me know if that's possible.
Yeah,
Uh,
the other one is Hassan Hassel. He's very vocal on Twitter about
oh
Urbit,
yes, yes,
I
yes,
mean,
yes.
and turf
Yeah.
specifically. So I don't think he'd mind being
Yeah.
doxxed
Okay, great. Yeah,
to
well,
this
I
extent.
think I've actually already asked him on the podcast, and he said he will. He is interested, but wants to wait a little bit. Um, and
Nice.
okay, so we got turf, we got business applications. So people are going to sell things. It's going to be a marketplace. I once tried to build a marketplace in 2013. I was actually running a different business in Rio de Janeiro. I was in Brazil. I was building a paintball field in the favela,
Mm,
run with my business partner at the time, who was from the favela, had no high school education, had gone to the army, and then once he was outside of the army, fell in love with paintball. And so then there were the favela was called Santa Marta in Rio de Janeiro, and it was the same one that Michael Jackson did his music video in the 1990s. And at that time, in the 1990s, it was run by drug dealers. But then, in preparation for the Olympics and the World Cup in Brazil, the the city government, decided to pacify the favelas. I love that term, pacify. And so they went in and they established the United States version of drug control, which is you own the area, militarily speaking or police speaking, uh, but of course it ended up eventually turning into back the same way that it works in America, which is all the drugs happen underground. And this is all a tangent, but basically there was a trash dump in the favela, and he cleared out the trash dump and then set up a paintball field, and I was one of the first foreigners to come play. And he was marketing it towards middle class Brazilians, and I was like, oh, let's market this towards backpackers and exchange students and charge more money. And so we did that, and it was really fun. And the crazy things happened there. as I should have predicted, of course, which I can save for another time. But then as that business was collapsing, my Brazilian friend who first brought me to that paintball field started talking to me about his application that he was building, which was a software application that was trying to connect music. It was right around the time of Groove Shark, before Spotify had came to dominate this market. And Groove Shark was a way to share free music that was slightly illegal, and the record labels went after them. And so my Brazilian friend, noticing in Brazil that most of the piracy was already totally like control of the Brazilian music market. Most of the Brazilian artists would make most of their money doing live shows, selling merchandise. And so we tried to set up a marketplace that the music, free music on a peer-to-peer system, brought people there. And then while they were there listening to music, we sell them also in a decentralized marketplace, sell them goods and e-commerce goods. And so yeah, I once set up a marketplace. Is really interesting. I like your idea, which is and it's been done before with other video games, which is essentially like bring people there for the fun of the game, but then while they're in the game, create a marketplace for real transactions. So I think that's a fun thing. Let's get into the user statistics, either if Turf or Urbit. What I'm really after is like how many people are on Urbit, and how much has it changed over the past couple of years. Like I'm now going on Urbit every day in order to do the messaging, which is what brought me there 2 or 3 years ago as well. And it's working much better. It's a much cleaner service, cleaner interface. It's like not crashing all the time. And I'm able to send messages and stuff. There's a few UI things. Like I tried to take a screenshot and upload the screenshot to the messenger, but it didn't work. So yeah, are people using Urbit now?
They seem to be. I'm probably not the best person to ask about this.
Who should I ask about that? How do I find out that information?
I don't know. I mean, I know that there's a website that tracks how many ships have been
Okay.
booted and how many ships are online. That doesn't really tell you how many people are using it though, because some people will use multiple ships and some people will boot a ship once and then never use it again. I'll say it definitely feels like there are more people around than when I first joined by a lot. Um, like when I first joined, I was very active in groups, in as many groups as I could find. Um, and I felt like I, recognized like a good proportion of the names I would see posting stuff.
Mm,
Nowadays I'm more focused on building stuff in a few groups that I'm active in, and then most of the rest of the stuff I just let it do its thing.
mm,
But I'm always seeing, new people I've never heard of who seem to have, who are like asking questions about Hoon, for example, that indicate that they've been around for a while and like know some stuff.
mm,
So I can't give any quantitative answer really, but it definitely feels like it's gotten quite a bit bigger in the last couple of years.
interesting. Okay.
Given that
Um,
there were about 500 people at Assembly in October, it seems like there are probably a good number of people using Urbit day to day.
Great. I just asked the question on Twitter to try to figure it out as well. And what I love, like, and Urbit really is like it's a quality thing, not a quantity thing at the moment. And quality always brings the quantity later. It's actually something I'm experiencing now with AirChat. So now I'm on AirChat, which is the voice first asynchronous note taking app that Naval Ravikant has built. And they've gone through several product iterations, and this last product iteration has nailed it, and it's very good. And so I've ever since I joined Quora in 2012, I noticed I really noticed what the principle that is at play here, which is that when it's a small group of insiders, it's great. There's so much good stuff happening in there. There's so much high signal things that are happening there. But then as the group grows, past the 150 number, Dunbar's number, but it can be even larger with that as long as that core group is really good. Then the quality starts to decline massively. And it happens with all groups. It seems to be an incontrovertible law of social relationships that the larger the group grows, the less valuable it is. And And so air chat's in this really beautiful thing that after I elicited that principle, I was like, okay, I want to find another one of those. And Urbit is one of those, and air chat is another one. There's probably going to be a bunch too. And it all relates to kind of the philosophy behind Urbit, which is the patchwork age, which somebody else talked about besides the creator of Urbit as well. The patchwork age. Both of them use the same term, but wildly different thinkers from wildly different fields, and both of them sort of agree that that we're entering a world where the large big tent is fracturing, and we as internet netizens and also in physical space, because there's a direct connection between the internet and the physical space, we're like awash, like it's the Tower of Babel has fallen. It's like it's gone. It's totally destroyed. And the Tower of Babel here being radio and television, being able to inject thoughts into millions and millions of people and project a common theme with a right and a left, but both of them within acceptable conditions and acceptable things. It's like you could have right thoughts, but those right thoughts were sort of defined, like they're all part of this thing. And you could have left thoughts, and those were sort of defined. And now it's all broken apart, and it's all gonna fracture and decentralize. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
That sounds accurate. Yeah. I I guess I grew up sort of after the fracture had begun,
Uh,
but it does feel like things have still fractured since I was a kid, you know. When I was a kid, everyone was on Facebook.
yes.
And now
Yes. Well, yeah.
everyone's on
Facebook
various
was the
places.
Yeah, Facebook was the like the technology that created the large media version. They were the ones who owned the social media idea of the big tent, but it was the last dying gasp of this media empire type of thing.
Yeah,
And it's really interesting that you mentioned that you grew up before it started to collapse. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 25.
25. And okay, so very interesting. And so you started programming when you were young, before high school. This is almost an impossible question to ask or answer, maybe, but what does it feel like to be like so for me, I grew up before the internet. I was logging on to AOL when I was probably like 12 years old, 13 years old. I recently interviewed Steve Case. If any listeners want to hear my interview with Steve Case, please send me a message. Steve Case was the founder of AOL, and so the AOL was like that was how I connected to the internet. But I had my maturation, like I matured after the internet became a thing, at which started to, but I then became it. I became part of the internet, like part of the sort of the Borg mind that the internet created. But after my maturation process had already started, like finished basically. Like by the time I was 25, the Facebook had been around for a couple of years, but it still was not as dominant in terms of its ability to do it. So, what does it feel like to be part of that? And like, what have you learned? What do you see people like my age? I'm 38. What do you see that we get wrong about the way the world works?
I mean, being myself, I feel like my experience is normal
Yeah, exactly. That's why I say it's
and
an
typical.
impossible question to ask. Yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't really notice too much from like the older generation that, you know, the slightly older generation that like has, you know, was around for the earlier days of the internet.
Mm.
It's like for the most part, it seems like they're pretty much keeping up as much as I am. I'm definitely not. I think by some definitions, I might be a Zoomer, and some definitions, I'm not. I'm not quite caught up on Zoomer culture, so I maybe tend to identify more with
Mm.
slightly older generation anyhow.
Yep.
Um, but as far as how the world works now, I mean, I don't know. I don't particularly notice too much of I don't see a lot from different generations where I'm like, oh, they don't get it, except for,
Yeah.
you know, really young people who don't know anything yet and really old people who are out of touch, but not even all people are out of touch.
Yeah. This is the funniest thing about older people is that that out of touch thing you mentioned is because they're out of touch in the sense that they can't there are new things that have happened that they can't fit into that big tent thing that they used to happen. Like that's they can no longer do that. But they have amazing wisdom. So as long as you don't talk
Yeah,
about politically charged subjects, they can give you really good answers that will essentially help you figure out your life. And it's sort of like this
absolutely.
elder wisdom thing that in a lot of our culture is kind of says is not that important because the technocrats and the neoliberals and the neocons too probably the all that whole thing basically says the tradition, we don't need any of that anymore, let's get rid of that, we're now part of the singularity's great, like, all the machines are going to solve all our problems now, we're all going to be in utopia, and it's like so far from the truth. But yeah, it's so focused on the now as opposed to the tradition. And so interesting. What do
I
you
mean,
most go for it?
I was just gonna say, if you're talking about things that actually matter, then generally the old people's wisdom is very relevant. It's
Yes.
just like if you're focusing on the new details that don't
Yes.
quite fit in.
Great.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. Um, uh, interesting. Hmm. Let's talk about like the Bay Area and the tech world there. Are you very connected with the tech world in the Bay Area?
No.
Oh,
I I live pretty close to San Jose and Silicon Valley and all that, but I'm like sort of tucked away in the mountains and
uh,
I don't go over there very much. And I never worked for any big companies, just like one small company in the area and then one small company remotely. I never went to school for programming. I don't have any connections there. So it's like I know a few people, but I'm not like connected to the scene at all. Just sort of doing my thing and talking to Urbit people.
yeah. Well, have you thought about raising money at all?
Uh, I have thought about it. I have an additional investment from the UF as part of the accelerator program they ran back in August, around then. So I'm good to go for most of this year. I am hoping that I can start making revenue in that time and not need to raise money, but I might raise money, or I might
Yeah,
try at least.
yeah, because it'd be hard because it goes back to that business problem of essentially like there aren't enough users to, if you start making transactional costs at like 3% of things that are sold on the marketplace, then it could be a while until that sustains all of your costs, which I imagine are the your life costs, which are probably the main money that's being talked about here. Well, yeah, actually, let's go
Yep.
into that because that's the important business thing is that I read, I think it was Talkwex. I don't know if that's how I pronounce it. Talkwex Syndicate wrote this brilliant thread on Twitter about how the cost of doing the Urbit stuff is actually pretty cheap. Like it doesn't actually cost a lot of things to be on Urbit. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, the only real cost is, well, I mean, if you're trying to build something full time, obviously you have your life costs to take care of.
Yeah.
But other than that, the only cost is the cost of running a computer that's connected to the internet.
Yep.
So if you're hosting it in your house, it's pretty cheap. If you're hosting it on the cloud, maybe it's like $25 a month if you want to be performant, or if you can get in with a cloud hosting provider, it's free for now. So
Yeah, interesting. And so I guess, but that cost would change if it scales, which is the same problem of building on the legacy industry as legacy internet as well, which is that if you build something and it scales, then you start having a good problem, but it's still a problem of how much money it actually takes. So like, I guess the follow-up question is like, are there any will there be any cost benefits to building on Urbit due to the technology and that problem we were talking about earlier about how legacy computing basically makes it easy to create bad programs? Are there any advantages to Urbit in that sense, or do you see them being created?
well, as far as the quality of the programming goes, I mean, there's a benefit to the developer and time saved and tiers saved.
Hmm.
Um, but I'd say the main most obvious benefit is that if your app scales, yes, you have to distribute the app to more people, but you don't have to run the app on more ships. Like people are running the app on their own computer. So
Oh.
if there are a million
Oh.
people using turf, I have to maybe serve the app to a million people so they can download it. But after that, I don't have to do anything. They can just run it and talk to each other.
Yeah, that's a cool piece of little treasure that we just discovered there, personally speaking. That's really interesting. And that's why the distributed computing, it's sort of like a node, basically. It's like no one can take down the network. Well, here's a great question. Do
Yeah.
you think that if the federal government got in its started to see what was happening, see the potential of Urbit in the same way they saw the potential of Monero and the same way that they saw the potential of Tornado Cash, do you think at this point the United States could shut down Urbit?
Hmm. I, first of all, I'm not a lawyer, nor
So
do I know much
well,
about
it wouldn't,
government operations.
it would be what's called extra legal, which
Okay,
is,
extra legal.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, could they shut it down? They, I think they really want to. They could probably make a pretty good effort. Like the thing about Urbit currently is everyone on the network, when you interact with someone, your computer now knows their IP. So
Ooh.
with that information, I don't know how many people are operating behind VPNs right now on Urbit. But the government could probably, if they really wanted
Track
to, find
everyone.
out where a lot of these people live and
Yeah.
force them to uninstall Urbit.
Uh,
I mean, they could shut down the website, urbit.org. People could still pass the operating system off to each other via flash drives. It'd be pretty hard to track it. You know, you just have to, you have to kick the feds off the network somehow, or like ban them, develop
uh,
a feature, figure out how to censor them properly. There's something for that in the ecliptic contracts, but I don't think it's integrated into the actual operating system.
this leads to a question of what percentage of users of Urbit are outside the US. And it now makes me think like we should definitely start some sort of hosting in Argentina, although Argentina is starting to move more towards alliances with the United States, which makes sense for because the president of Argentina is more concerned about the domestic issues of Argentina rather than trying to fight foreign dragons. Uh, but yeah, definitely gonna make a note to start helping people host inside of Argentina, maybe getting Native Planet to send some stuff down here. Um, I really want to interview the guys from Native Planet. I think we had discussed it many years ago, but um, yeah,
Yeah, they're great.
yeah.
I think you'd have fun with that.
So we got about 10 minutes left. Okay, so we talked a lot about Urbit, we talked a lot about Turf. Yeah, what are you most excited about in terms of the product roadmap for Turf?
I'm really excited to add more interesting item interactions. So I
Hmm.
just recently released, hopefully some of this will be out by the time the episode is out. But I just recently released basic item interactions where you can say, if I click on this item, then show this text, or if I step on this item, teleport me here, or if I step on this item, display text, and you can sort of mix match triggers and effects for a given item. So I just want to add more interesting triggers, more interesting effects, more ways to combine them so that you can just make your turf, have its own customized behavior. This can go really deep and become sort of like almost a game engine within a game. But I'm really excited to keep exploring that route because I think it adds a lot of interesting value to the product.
This is brilliant.
It's something people to do. Gives
So
people
there's
something to do.
a lot of questions that came up from that. One is I imagine you're familiar with 3JS. Um,
Mhm.
it's for my listeners who don't know, 3JS is essentially a JavaScript for using the GPU. You're using your computer's GPU in order to do really cool graphics on a browser. And so it just got me thinking about like how different is JavaScript from what you're doing, like or front end at your previous job versus front end now? Does it take you more time? Does it take you less time? Does it allow you more functionality? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'm still using JavaScript for the front end. Um,
Oh, so you
so I
could
have
use JS. Oh, interesting. Okay, got it. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
perfect.
So some people are doing a thing where they sort of write the front end in a hybrid of like Hoon and HTML and JS all on the Urbit side, and then it serves up a page. But because of the way Urbit or because of the way Turf works, you really need a lot of logic happening in the front end. So I use solid.js instead of it's sort of like React, but it's a lot more lightweight. And I prefer it at least for now.
Oh,
Um, So I use that and Phaser.js as a game engine on the front end to run all the game stuff. And then I have ways to, interact with the Urbit backend to send actions that people are doing and get back the updates of what happened.
Got it. Okay, that's so interesting. Have you thought about Three.js?
Um, Not particularly. It's, if I recall correctly, it's, you know, sort of thing I would want to use if I was building my own game engine and I'm just using Phaser.js, which automatically will either use OpenGL or WebGL, or it'll just, sort of use a CPU renderer if that's not available. And it can sort of switch between the two automatically.
Oh, got it.
Um, so I'm using that for right now. I have some qualms with it, but it's saved me a lot of time versus doing everything myself in that department. Um, I, might go through and do things a different way at some point.
Mm,
And it would be cool to have a 3D version of Turf at some point also, which
mm,
there are a number of different ways I might go about that. But for the time being, I sort of just want to stick with, the simple thing that's working and try and get features out.
mm. Interesting. Okay. OpenGL. What is OpenGL?
OpenGL is a uh,
Graphics lab.
I've been learning a bit about OpenGL recently, but I don't want to. If I say anything, there's gonna be someone who will be like, technically, that's not quite what it is. But essentially, it's a graphics protocol for telling your graphics card what to display on the screen. So, it's like there's an OpenGL API which you can use to say, here's some vertexes in 3D space, and I would like you to draw a triangle between these vertexes, and then here's a program written in graphics. Um, what is it? I forgot what the name is, but it's a shader language that compiles and runs on the graphics card, and it turns the vertexes into different vertexes by like rotating them or moving the camera around, and then it runs through a fragment shader, which turns that into, pixel values, different colors for different parts on the triangle, and then it renders it to the screen. Um,
Hmm.
and it allows you to draw things much faster than you can if you're just on the CPU saying, I want this pixel to be this color, I want this pixel to be this color, because it's running on dedicated hardware that knows how to do matrix multiplication really fast, basically.
Very interesting. It makes me think that I want to introduce you to my friend Eric Levin, who is the main muse for this podcast back in 2018. He does some very interesting 3D programming stuff. He's the one who told me about 3JS and the shader stuff. And he likes building virtual worlds and stuff like that. And I feel like you guys would have a good conversation because he's also wants to build virtual worlds and helps people build virtual worlds. He doesn't know a Hoon.
Cool.
He barely knows about Urbit, but yeah, his name is Eric Levin. Well, this has been great. Thank you for coming on the show. How can people find out more about Turf and maybe also follow you on whatever platform you write about your experience building Turf?
Well, if they want to just see occasional updates, they can follow me on Twitter at turf_on_Urbit. There's a turf group on Urbit itself. So if you go to poster hoster midlev minder and join the turf group, then you can, suggest features in there, or you can ask questions or get help if you're having an issue with the app, or hear about announcements or just see what I'm working on in more real time. Um, my DMs on Urbit are always open, and Twitter as well, although I'm less responsive there probably. And I do a turf time every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, where in Pandex and Turf, we do a video call with whoever shows up for generally about an hour. Um, and sometimes we'll try out new features, or sometimes we'll just talk about things, or you know what Turf should do in the future. We might start um, playing Werewolf and try and see if we can integrate that into Turf. Or that was something we
Uh,
talked about last week.
what time again? Turf time?
1 p.m. Pacific on Thursdays.
Okay, perfect. I'll come join. I'm gonna put that on
Thanks.
my calendar. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun.